For the past 6 decades, Jim Bolger has played a leading role in Irish racing. Born on Christmas Day in 1941, the Master of Culcullen has never been one to do things by the book and has remained steadfast in his approach, even on those occasions when the odds seem stacked against him.
And it's Jet Ski Lady who's made all the running and quickened up 3 clear of Shadaid, and the stamina now is really starting to sap, but it's Jet Ski Lady from Shadaid. Jet Ski Lady clear by 4, Shadaid. Jaffa line through on the inside, Dartry on the outer. Shamshir is finishing well for a place, just over a furlong to go, and Jet Ski Lady kicks on the ground she loves. She's clear by 6 to 8, and it's Jet Ski Lady and Christy Roach, and it's Jet Ski Lady who's going to take it. Shadaid second at best, Shamshir pressing for a place, but at the line it's Jet Ski Lady the winner.
Jovite's going to storm away with the Irish Derby. Jovite was second and Epsom is winning 6, 7, 8, 10 lengths between him and Dr. Nevius and contesting men, and at the line Jovite is winning, Dr. Nevius in second.
As they head inside the final quarter mile, Finchgale Bio is asked to quicken up on the stands fence, and she takes a length or 2 out of the field there, followed by Scarlet Runner, Tree, Simply Perfect, Arch Swing in the centre, Puggy stays on, then you're Keen and Indian Ink, but inside the final favourite, furlong, the favourites in front, it's Finchgale Bio by 2 or 3 lengths to Arch Swing, and racing to the line, Finchgale Bio is a class apart.
New approach threading a passage. Dr. Fremantle passing the 2. From Casual Conquest down the outside. Tartan Bear, a new approach. Hits back to the inside, has got the rail, and he's right alongside. New approach on the inside, the outside. Tartan Bearer, and it's new approaching the green by about half a length. Wandering off a straight line. Tartan Bear in second, but new approach keeping going all the way down to the line. We'll see it out and win the Vodafone Derby. Dawn Approach the blue, Tornado in grey. The unbeaten horses with Gloria waits for a shock over on the far side. Dawn Approach asserts on the climb up the hill. Tornado now under pressure. Gloria waits is back in 3rd place. It's Dawn Approach who's 2 to 3 lengths clear in the Guineas. Gloria waits running a blinder as Tornado runs out of puff. But Dawn Approach, 7 from 7, wins the Kitco 2,000 Guineas.
But it's Trading Leather, the leader from Galileo Rock as he races inside the final furlong. Trading Leather in the lead, Galileo Rock coming after him all the time. Capper rushes third place to Cheer, Vogel up the line. Trading Leather and Kevin Manning win the derby for Jim and Jackie Bolger.
Spread across the track, it's Max Sweeney attempting to fight him off one by one. Poetic Flair on the near side, the far side is Van Gogh. Jim Bolger has the winning of it. It's Max Sweeney on the far side of Poetic Flair. Max Sweeney and Rory Cleary, a special day.
Jim Bolger, thank you very much for having Steve and I spend the next hour or so in your company. It's a pleasure to even begin to start looking at the horses that you've trained through your long career. But the first place to start, obviously, was why you got into training racehorses. And I believe that you started very close to Phoenix Park, which I think carries quite a lot of sentiment for a lot of people in the sport, particularly here in Ireland.
Yes, well, we used to have a very famous racecourse there, but sadly it has disappeared now, and there are houses there instead, probably badly needed, but it was a great pity that it was ever lost. I was living in Clonsilla at the time, and we had about 4 acres at the back of the house, but we had access to a few hundred acres which belonged to Dublin Corporation, and as you know, town councils and county councils never do anything in a hurry, so it was building land, and it was just left there for a number of years, and we availed of the use of it free of charge, and along with that then we used the gallops in the Phoenix Park as well. So it was a good place for me to start because I didn't have to be maintaining my own gallops. It was all done for me.
And why a career as a racehorse trainer? What drove you in that direction?
Well, it wasn't really as a racehorse trainer. It was more as a racehorse owner, and then they had to be trained. Right. So I was not going to find anybody who could train them as reasonably as I could do it. So I was the obvious trainer at that stage. And I started with, I think, 4 horses and a permit. And while they ran well, I didn't have a winner. And that was 1975. And the following year then, I think it was in July, some of the horses I had on permit ran well, and they were noticed by somebody. So I was asked to train a horse in July of 76. So I had to take out a license to do that. And hence I became an overnight racehorse trainer, and it's just gone on from there.
Well, obviously we'll talk about the amazing achievements, but what was the ambition when you started training? What did you want to do with your training career? Or did you have targets, plans where you expected to see yourself in years to come?
Well, from the time I was 12 and at school, I was a racecourse in the bookie's office in Enniscorthy. So I had a keen interest, and it was a great time in Irish racing for somebody as young as I was to have an interest, because Vincent O'Brien was just becoming established, and PJ Prendergast was having a lot of success in Ireland. It was mainly those two. They ruled the roost. And it was mainly their horses that I used to have my few bob on as well. So it gave me a great insight into how racing functioned. So long before I became a trainer, I was a racegoer and a punter.
What would be the first good horse that you felt you trained, one that stood out above all the others?
I suppose the first good one was Condessa. Jackie and I bought a house in Ballymore Eustace, which wouldn't be far from the Curragh, and there was a lot of interest in racing around there. And excuse me, the Mullins owned Ardenode studs, so it was easy to maintain the interest at that stage. And anyway, bought this house in Ballymore Eustace, and the builder who built the house came back to me after we had moved from there to Clonsilla in Dublin. Would have been about maybe best part of 10 years later, and said he was tired building and he was retiring and he'd like to have a racehorse. And he, knowing me from buying the house from him, he probably followed what I was doing. I never really asked him, but that would have been the only reason I'd say that he contacted me. And I asked him, did he want a flat horse or a jumper? And he said, I'll leave that to you. So there was only one decision then. And I asked, oh yeah, how much money? And he gave me a cheque for 20,000 to buy a horse for him.
So this would be, what, 19...
This would have been 19 maybe 81 or thereabouts.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of money then, isn't it?
Yeah, oh, it was, yes. But I had had some success in some horses before that. But you asked me which was
first good one. Yeah,
the first good one.
She won the Musidora and the Yorkshire Oaks. So
that's right.
out
Yeah,
really, very good filly.
Yes. So I bought her for 12 or 13,000. And I couldn't find the second one, and I had to give him back the money, and it was killing. It was killing me.
At least you gave it back to him.
Yes, I did.
Did he have another horse with you after?
Oh, he did. Yes, yeah, including the winner of the Christmas hurdle at Kempton.
Perfect.
But anyway, Condessa, she won a couple of races as a 2-year-old, including what was the biggest nursery of the year down the road here in Gorham Park. It was the Waterford Glass or Waterford Crystal Nursery, and you got a tea chest full of Waterford Glass, that was for the owner, which I saw about 20 years later, and it had never been opened. But the following year then, she needed a mile and a quarter, mile and a half to be at her best. So we couldn't find a race other than in Clonmel for her, which was, as far as I can remember, was an all-age handicap. But she won it anyway from a horse that went on to win a number of races for John Ox Sr. And we were impressed with her that day, the way she won. So we went off to Lingfield then after that with a certain amount of confidence. And I think she was second at, or maybe she won it, I'm not sure. She was either first or second at Lingfield in the Lingfield Oaks trial. And the owner wasn't over. His name was Paddy Barrett, and I phoned him and I said, now that we're over here, I said, she's in a race at York on Thursday or Friday, whatever day the Musidora is after the Lingfield Oaks trial. And I said, you might as well get value for the trip. So we went up there anyway, and she won the Musidora. And she beat Glass Slipper, which was Henry Cecil's 1,000 guineas winner. So that at the time, that was a huge boost. That was as big as beating Vincent O'Brien in a maiden 2-year-old race at the Coruscant, you know. So, and then she didn't operate too well on the faster ground, and we went back for the Yorkshire Oaks. With a new owner, she was sold for a lot of money. And I think she was last after they turned into the straight. And Jack Doyle had been the agent. And a friend of mine was watching Jack down at the railing, watching the race. And he goes, please God, don't let her be last. So anyway, she got up and won. Yeah. So that was a big day, and she definitely was the first of the really good ones.
Well, you had a lot of good fillies after that, and in preparing to chat to you, we began to realise from very early on a lot of fillies that turned into very influential broodmares, and I'll just mention some. Park Appeal, who ended up the Dam of Cape Cross. Give Thanks, who I think ended up Harrier, who won the Guineas in the Shadwell Sheikh Hamdan's colours. She came from the Give Thanks line. Park Express, Dam of New Approach, who we will talk about no doubt. And Flame of Tara, who you also trained. And she was an outstanding broodmare as well. Salsabil and Marjou were her progeny, amongst others.
Yes.
I mean, and breeding became a very big thing very quickly for you, did it?
Yes, well, I found with those good fillies that I had, I'd go back to Goffs or Newmarket and try to buy a half-sister, and of course it was futile. So I realised at that stage that the only way I could possibly have good horses at a reasonable price was to try to breed them. And I'd buy fillies with good pedigrees, and hopefully they'd be good enough then to keep. And if they hadn't shown it on the racecourse, if they had shown me something at home, I was happy to keep them.
You make light of that, though, Jim. Other people will be trying to do that as well. You were very successful doing that. You know, that's one of the things, as Rishi just read out that list. You must have had a really good eye. You were talking about your upbringing and, being interested in going into betting shops or whatever, but you clearly had a pretty good eye for a horse as well.
Yeah, well, I had to have, because it was survival.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When you say it was survival, I mean, it actually makes it sound dramatic for us. I mean, we obviously now look at your success and your career and how you've done, but there are times in a trainer's career, I imagine, that you're on the edge, and one decision going the wrong way could spell the end. Was it as clear cut as that for you during the early establishing
Maybe
years?
not one decision, but I had to get it right to stay in business. And I realised that, you know, when I gave up my job and went training, that it was all or nothing. So, but it was never going to be all in a grandiose way. It was just rear my family and stay in business. It was a business that I liked and I wanted to stay in it. But apart from that, I didn't really have any huge ambition.
We'll move on to a little bit later on in the 90s, and another very, very good filly who caught a lot of people by surprise on Oaks Day at Epsom. I don't believe, having chatted to you a few moments ago, that it caught you by surprise when Jet Ski Lady won the Oaks at 50-1. What's the story? What's the background to that?
Well, in a way it goes back to Park Appeal as well, because her half-brother, no, her full brother, he subsequently was named Nashima. He came up for sale in Goffs, and I bought him for more money than I would have had at the time anyway. And about an hour later, a very flustered Michael Goodbody came to me and told me that he was supposed to be in Goffs to buy the horse, but he got held up, I think it was traffic, and he didn't get there in time. And I don't think there was any telephone bidding at that time. And he was supposed to buy the horse for Sheikh Maktoum. And he asked me, would I take profit? And would I what? But I had a stipulation that I wanted to train the horse. So it was the first horse I got from Sheikh Maktoum. And then following on from that then, I got Jet Ski Lady, which was his filly. Yeah. And Joe Mercer was his racing manager, and Joe was very, very easy to deal with and understood the sport very well, and how there had to be a build-up for the big races. You know, you just didn't walk into them. And from that point of view, he was very easy to deal with. So he left it to me anyway. And we knew at the back end that she was quite a useful filly. She had won a good handicap either earlier in the year or a nursery at the back end at Leopardstown. And we took it from there then at that stage. But she needed to get her toe in a little bit. And Christy Roach was my jockey at the time, and he was very keen on her as well. So fortunately I had her entered in the Oaks. I usually don't miss the entries. But anyway, she went to Epsom, having won her, I think it was 2 races in Ireland, and she was in pretty good order. And we felt that most of the opposition, they were nearly all milers, having a go at the Oaks. And it started to rain the night before as well, so we had soft ground, and we had what we considered to be the only filly in the race that would stay a mile and a half. So she won very easily.
And she was 50-1.
Yes, yeah.
But you rode her very positively. You know, she was ridden. She had a long way out, didn't she?
Yes, yeah. Well, that was to stretch the milers.
Yeah. She went on, to be fair, to prove she was on other. She didn't do anything spectacular since, but she ran well. She was touched off in the Irish Oaks, I think it was, and she was touched off in the Yorkshire Oaks as well. So I mean, she's run. She maintained a pretty high level of form.
She did, yeah. Well, Pat Edery had taken over at that stage, and he probably didn't know her as well as Christy and didn't have the same confidence in her ability to stay. So that might have been her undoing at York.
Move on to talk about another horse, and actually he's just behind Steve and I, and it's a real joy and thrill to talk about Saint Jovite, who the summer of his 3-year-old career was just sparkling. I mean, when I mention the name Saint Jovite, what are the memories that immediately come back to what he was like?
Well, I remember the first time I saw him, He was broken in riding at that stage, and he had been pre-trained in Payson Park in Florida, and he was a pretty well developed horse, but you could see that there probably was more there to come. And I think, as well as I can remember, he won first time out, and he then won a group race at the Curragh. Memory doesn't permit me to tell you which race it was, but Vincent was second in that. And he came to me after the race and he says, I think you have a good one there. So it just went on from there then. We did run in the Colts race at Longchamp on Arc Day. And
Yes.
I
Pretty
think
good horse won that. Arazi won that. day.
Arazi, yeah. And Christy said Arazi would never beat him again.
Wow.
So that was good enough for me.
Yeah,
He didn't run any more then after that. And then we had him beaten a couple of times in soft ground in the springtime. And it only dawned on us at that stage that he wasn't as good in the soft. So as soon as he got good ground then, things began to happen. But we had a hold up before the Epsom Derby, and he was short a gallop or two.
I thought I was going to ask you, because you met Dr. Devious for the first time then,
Yes.
and you were an honourable second, but
Yes.
you turned it round big time a few weeks later.
Yeah, well, he benefited a lot from the run.
Right.
Yeah.
Was that the only thing you learned? Because again, maybe it's just my eye. When I watched the two races back again, he was given a very positive ride in the Irish Derby, as though you felt stamina was a strong suit for him.
Yeah, well, he preferred to go right-handed.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Right.
and good ground. That was the key to him.
Right. Right.
And I suppose the only two times he got it were at the Curragh and
Ascot.
Yeah, the King George.
Ascot. Yeah.
He's 12 length winning at the Curragh, 6 length winning at the King George. I mean, again, we've been going through a lot of horses over the last few weeks talking to people. Those performances were very high class performances, weren't they? He at his best, he was a seriously good horse.
Oh, he was, and he holds the track record for the 1.5 miles at the Curragh, and it was questioned afterwards, but it was checked out every which way, and the time was proven to be correct.
The battle with Dr. Devious obviously carried on, and they met again in the Irish Champion. I mean, there was very little again between them. What were your memories of that race?
Well, then he was going left-handed, and I think the ground was a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And Christy was a thrill seeker as well, and he loved winning races by short heads. And I think on that occasion he just might have misjudged it a little bit. Right. But you're only talking about fractions of an inch. Yeah.
And then he went on to run in the Arc. I mean, he had a...
Well, the rain came,
Yeah.
I think, on the Thursday before the Arc. And it was the only time that I ever saw Christy lacking in confidence. I still think that possibly might have been a little different if he had ignored the ground, if Christy had ignored the ground and just jumped out and rode his race, but he rode him with a certain amount of caution, and he wasn't able to quicken in the soft ground.
There are a lot of other good colts to talk about, and we will talk about some of the others. But I mean, maybe it's with rose-tinted glasses that you look back at a certain period and you think that they were a little bit better the further back in history you go. But looking at your colts that you've had, where would you put him?
Oh, he's the best at 1.5 miles. Yeah. Probably the best at 1.25 miles as well. Yeah.
That's saying something. We're going to talk about some horses later.
And
it was seriously good.
Further than that, I said, you'll find it hard to find a better one than won the King George.
Yeah.
I don't believe that he got the credit for that maybe he should have got. But it didn't stop Time Farm from rating him fairly highly. The horse he beat that day went on to win the Japan Cup, and he came back the following year and won the King George.
Opera House.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he beat him very easily.
Yeah, I'd say there were some outstanding older horses up against him. I think Sir Michael Stout might have had 3 against him. Rockhopper, Sadler's Hall, etc.
Yeah.
There were some top-class horses, and
Yeah,
he dismissed them.
he did. And Lester knew that he was going to win as well, because he had me pestered for the ride. And we were good friends at that stage.
Yeah.
And I would love to have given him the ride, but I wanted to use an Irish jockey on the day, because it was part of the promotion of Irish racing.
Yes.
And Mrs. Payson wanted Steve Cawthon, so we had our first disagreement at that stage. But anyway, Christie was suspended, so I went for Stephen Crane. But Lester came to me after the race and he said, even my tired old arms would have won on him.
Down into the dip now, Finchgale Bao, shorthand English Ballet. Then right here, Danyata on the outside of this, but it's again Kevin Manning and Finchgale Bao, who's sprinting clear now as they enter the final furlong. Right here in second place with Frankie Dettori is out after her, but Finchgale Bao is clear. She's lead. We're going to win by 2 or 3 lengths. Finchgale Bao goes on to win very impressively.
As they head inside the final quarter mile, Finchgale Bio is asked us quicken up on the stands fence, and she takes a length or 2 out of the field there, followed by Scarlet Runner, Tree, Simply Perfect, Arch Swing in the centre, Puggy stays on, then you're Keen and Indian Ink, but inside the final favourite, furlong, the favourites in front, it's Finchgale Bio by 2 or 3 lengths to Arch Swing, and racing to the line, Finchgale Bio is a class apart.
Jim, we'll move on and talk about horses from 2000 through to 2009-10, and again, a number of very, very high-class ones. One filly in particular during that spell stood out for her 2-year-old career, and then what she did through the early part of her 3-year-old career. Finchgale Bio, who was campaigned with a freedom and a panache that I think for racing fans we really enjoyed. What was she like, and what encouraged you to be as bold and as venturous with her?
Well, she was very straightforward, and she was very good as well. And Michael Ryan is a great sportsman, so he was happy to go wherever I felt she should go. The reason that she had 2 close runs at the back end of the season was that she had won the fillies race at Longchamp, and I wasn't sure that would make her champion, European champion 2-year-old, because I always felt that the Irish and the French, in a way, and I might be wrong about this, that they weren't as influential as the British were when it came to assessing the horses for the European Championship. And I said to Michael Ryan, we better make sure of that. And the only way we can make sure of it is to run again in the Rockfell Stakes at Newmarket. So she had to turn around fairly quickly for that. And that was the reason, was to make sure that, as far as we could, that she would be champion European 2-year-old, which she was.
Well, she obviously had that ability to take races quickly, because the start of her 3-year-old, she won 2 Guineas and was second in the French Guineas in between the British and the English and Irish Guineas, and second in the French in about a 4-week period, something like that. It was a fairly short period, so she's really tough.
3 weeks.
3-week period. Yeah, she's certainly tough.
Yes, she was. But she had a relatively easy time as a 2-year-old. She won her maiden, I think, first time. And then she got a fracture. I think it was a cannon bone fracture, but it was only hairline. And to encourage people whose horses get fractures, she recovered from it fairly quickly. And we decided to go to Tralee with her for a prep race for the Goffs Million. And we thought it was only a matter of going down there and coming back, that she'd win a nursery down there. But she was beaten by one of Con Collins's horses that he had laid out for a gamble, as he always did, in Tralee. So he put manners on us anyway. We finished second, but we were happy with her. And she then went for the Goffs Million after that. And that was a huge field, and they were spread across the Curragh. And she was on the near side, and I can't remember where she ended up. She was third or fourth. But we always felt that it was the draw that beat her. So we weren't too put off after that, and we headed to Longchamp.
Yeah, and you mentioned she won that race at Longchamp, then she won at Newmarket. But the almost heartbreak of the 3 races, the 3 guineas. So she was only a head away from completing what would have been the most remarkable treble.
I think, with all due respects to the winner that day in Longchamp, the softer ground didn't suit her, and she was beating a short head. So and came back to the Curragh then, and she won at the Curragh. I have to say now, she wasn't as good at the Curragh as she had been at Newmarket. Like, the 3 races did leave a mark on her, and I don't think she won again.
No, she didn't, and I was going to ask about that. Was it as simple as that? You think maybe those 3 races, that part of the season, left that lasting effect, or?
Well, she might have tired of the game a little bit. I wouldn't say that it left a huge mark on her as such, but she just might have had enough.
A wide open looking Dewhurst, Holy Roman Emperor towards the stand side, fighting for racing room as Teofilo now begins to find his stride. Teofilo strikes on from right leg wide, rallying cry goes to the near side. Holy Roman Emperor now weaving a run, is forced to race out wide, challenging the leader inside the final furlong. It's the rematch. Teofilo on the near side of Holy Roman Emperor. They go neck and neck. Holy Roman Emperor the far side, and Teofilo just won it.
We'll talk about another horse just around that period, just slightly before Finchgall Bio, and that's Teofilo, who was an outstanding 2-year-old. 5 starts, 5 wins, all at 7 furlongs. And sometimes when you talk about horses and what they could have been, he remains one of the great what could have been in racing, because even though he was brilliant as a 2-year-old, there was even talk about him going for the Triple Crown, I believe, as a 3-year-old. How good a horse was he?
Well, he was as good a 2-year-old as I've had, over 7 and a mile. We always felt that he was really going to shine as a 3-year-old, but unfortunately he had his accident and he didn't get to run again, it was tough at the time, but he had done enough to make a sire, so there was an out with him.
We'll never know. How far do you think he would have stayed? Is he, nothing will be. You can't prove it, but in your heart, what did you think?
Well, we always felt he'd stay a mile and a half.
Right.
Yeah.
So the talk of the Triple Crown was possible at that stage, at least. Up to a mile and a half. Then you'd think about it. I mean, had things gone well.
It was, and sure, Vincent had showed us how to win the Triple Crown.
Yeah.
So it was just a question of following that if you had the horse.
Yeah.
And on that, are you the type of person that wants to win a Triple Crown because of the tradition? So very often we've seen in the past horses, say for example, like Nash won the Guineas, he won the Derby, but then never went for the Leger. Other horses that complete the double, it's a dream for us who have heard and think of Nijinsky and one day would like to see it done again. Camelot close.
Tried, yeah, absolutely.
Is that, in terms of tradition in the sport, are you of that ilk that you would like to see that done?
Oh, very much so, yeah. And not minding my own business, I'd be looking at horses that could have done it.
Yeah.
And I always felt that it would have been great for Irish racing if See the Stars had turned up in the Irish Derby. But they went a more conservative route with him and gave him plenty of time, and John Ox did a masterful job with him. But I think if ever there was to be another Triple Crown horse, when Teofilo didn't make it, that See the Stars definitely would have.
Yeah.
And with hindsight, I don't think there are too many people who would disagree with that.
No, he would have allowed himself to stay as far as it, because he was such a settled horse, wasn't he?
Yes,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of thought, because the following year, after Teofilo, I kind of thought that New Approach might be a Triple Crown candidate, because obviously he had the same campaign as Teofilo.
Yeah, well, he pulled muscles in his back or rear end fairly badly, either during or after Epsom. He wasn't quite right after Epsom, and I didn't have the choice then at that stage. I didn't get to go for the Irish Derby. We only got him back then. I think I know that I was told the vet said to rest him for 5 or 6 or 7 weeks, but we had him back on. I was very fortunate in that I have a treadmill, and I had him on the treadmill about 3 weeks before he was supposed to be out of the box. So that enabled us to get him back then for, I can't remember, the International, which was run at Newmarket on the July course. And he was second or third there, but we knew that he wasn't cherry ripe. But that left him right then for the Irish Champion Stakes, which he won. Not terribly impressively, but he was back to himself then for the Champion Stakes at Newmarket.
Yeah.
I think he might still hold the track record.
That was almost his finest day, do you not think? In hindsight, it won by 6 lengths and he was imperious that day.
Yeah.
And that's just a question of him recovering full fitness and coming right back to his best, you felt?
It was, and also I felt he was better at 1.25 miles than he was at 1.5 miles. So having discussed the possibility of not going for the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe with John Ferguson, decided that the Champion Stakes was his race. So the only sad thing about that was that he went straight to stud after that. And he didn't even come home that evening.
Oh, did he not?
No.
Oh.
Yeah.
What sort of 4-year-old would he have made, do you think?
Asher, I think he would have been outstanding. Yeah, because while he had the problem with the muscles in his back, he had fully recovered from that. And he had 3 very successful runs, the one on the July course, then back to Leopardstown, and then back to Newmarket for the Champion Stakes. And he was fine after all those. So I would think that he probably would have been very sound as a 4-year-old. So, but it wasn't to be.
Only about 4 lengths covers the field at the 3, and Ouija Board in the centre. Now looms up on the outside, grabs a narrow lead. Here's Alexander Goldrun and Race for the Stars. It's going to be a 2.5 furlong sprint on here, as Ouija Board, the far side, is now being tackled by Alexander Goldrun. Behind them is Race for the Stars, and they've kicked away from Chelsea Rose. The 2 great fillies, a 1.5 furlong left to go. Far side Ouija Board, near side Alexander Goldrun. Not a breath between them. 4 lengths in front of Melina, battling on. Ouija Board, the far side, won't give in. Near side is Alexander Goldrun. Absolutely nothing between them. They race towards the line now. Photo between Ouija Board and Alexander Goldrun.
My favourite horse that you've trained, just for whatever reason, but that was Alexander Goldrun, who was incredibly tough. Won all sorts of places, won in Hong Kong, won in Britain, won in Ireland, and even in defeat, one of the great races when she and Ouija Board locked horns in the Nassau. Could have gone either way, literally on the nod. But a fantastic horse race.
That was the fillies, Grundy and Busting.
It really was, wasn't it? It was a great race. And I thought she was a wonderful filly.
I don't think you could look any place else for a fillies race that would come near Grundy and Bustino.
Yeah.
And the annoying thing about her was that she never did more than 97% of her best, and that was why she lasted so long.
Yeah.
That she would give you so much, but wouldn't give you that last couple of ounces that were needed.
Well, she didn't do badly though. she had a fair CV.
No, she was good. Yeah, she was very good.
Yeah.
But probably if she'd, I probably should have put cheek pieces or blinkers on her at some stage.
Right.
But she was doing so well the way she was.
Yeah.
I probably wasn't courageous enough to do it.
Okay.
She sort of really blossomed at the end of her 3-year-old
Yeah.
career.
Yes.
She went to Longchamp. She won the opera.
Yeah.
And then she went to Hong Kong, and she beat quite at the time Bullish Luck, who was the sort of the big horse over there. I mean, that must have been a special memory for you to pull that victory off.
It was a great day. Yeah, one of the greats. Yeah, it was. And also, I couldn't believe that the Chinese played the Irish national anthem so well.
Right?
I've never heard it played better in Ireland.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
So it was a huge day.
Another very good filly in this sort of period was Lashes, who again, not your standard campaign when you see how her 3-year-old career unfolded. The one start at 2, wasn't it? She won a big sales race as a 2-year-old.
It wasn't a big sales race. It was the Goff's Million. She's, as far as I know, she is the only horse in racing history that won £1 million first time on the track.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there wouldn't be many, that's for sure.
And she was dogged with sore shins all spring and into the summer, and she was spending more time in the spa than she was in her box. But they were nice and cool that day anyway, and that was her big day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she won the Musadora, and she started favourite for the Oaks on the day. I thought she didn't stay. That turned out rubbish because later on she proved herself at a mile and a half. But you did drop her back to a mile to win the Coronation Stakes, so she was clearly very versatile.
She was, yeah. I'd have to give all credit for her to my staff.
Okay.
Pat O'Donovan and whoever he called upon late at night to take her to the spa. But not alone that, she was highly temperamental.
Was she?
And very difficult to handle, and very, very difficult to keep the lid on her. And I remember at Goodwood one day, and Goodwood is not an easy place for something that's highly strung, and they managed to do it there. So she was one of the greats, and would have been even better if she had been sounder.
Yeah. When you say temperament, I mean, in comparison to other horses, I mean, where would her level of naughtiness be?
I'd say if she was human, she would have ended up in an asylum.
But you did eventually win a mile and a half with her because you won the Yorkshire Oaks with her. Having said, the Oaks looked like she maybe didn't stay, but you did win a Yorkshire Oak for her. So she was, as I say, in terms of a mile and a half,
as you only too well know, Epsom is Epsom.
Yeah, and
true. And it didn't suit her.
Yeah, fair enough.
She didn't come down the hill very well at Newmarket either.
Right.
In the Guineas, I think we had I can't remember what it was now, but we had a more fancied one.
Right, yeah.
And Kevin Manning rode that. But she didn't handle Newmarket that well, and it probably wasn't clever going to Epsom.
Right.
Yeah, you mentioned the other horse that Kevin Manning rode, and another very good filly in Shorshirabu. Again, there are a lot of top-class Group 1 horses that some people don't quite remember as fondly or as well as others, but she was outstanding as a 2-year-old. I think she beat Henry the Navigator in a Group 1. I mean, what are your memories of?
In the Phoenix Stakes at the Curragh, yeah, she was very good. but she didn't always do it. You couldn't rely on her to do it every day.
Right.
But she was certainly very good that day, and like that was her Group 1. And didn't she win the Midler as well?
She did,
Yeah.
on the Midler, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So she was a very good 2-year-old.
Yes,
Very, very good.
she was, but she was very brave, and she was very good on those days. But maybe it was my training didn't suit her that well, but I wasn't always able to have her in the same form as she was on both of those days.
Down into the dip, out wide George Vancouver is staying on, meeting rising ground, now Dawn Approach begins to lengthen, comes alongside Lettermore. George Vancouver is still finishing off, but Dawn Approach has moved on and is beginning to forge clear. Dawn is still rising, and like father like son, Dawn Approach wins the Dewhurst. A 1-2 for Jim Bolger.
Jim, if we move on to 2010 beyond, and along came another very, very talented 2-year-old, and one who had quite the 2-year-old campaign. Dawn Approach, he started racing in March. He won his first race. He won at Royal Ascot. He won at Royal Ascot on his 4th start, and then he went all the way to win the Dewhurst. What are your memories of particularly that 2-year-old campaign, first of all?
Well, when in round about we knew from the time we got him, from the time he came up from the farm, that he looked the part, and there was always that sort of bossy air about him, and he walked and strutted as if he knew he was good. And along with that, you know, around February time, he was a bit cheeky, and he used to get above himself a bit. So we gave him a couple of bits of work to see would it put manners on him and settle him down, but he was still full of it. So the only thing to do then was to carry on, because at that stage with colts, you know, they can go the other way as well, you know, and things might not work out. So if we were, say, having him on the easy list and waiting, if you had a policy of not running a 2-year-old until June, by the time June would come along with him, he could be the boss in the yard. So anyway, we decided to go to the races, and we thought he'd win first time, and he did. And then I think there's a listed race at Naas. We went for that, and he might have had another run at Naas as well. And then we headed to Ascot, and he did the business there. He was workmanlike there, but he was often workmanlike because he used to hit a flat spot, maybe about 2 down, but then he'd pick up again and go, and he just progressed from there.
There was a fair bit of hype about him at that point already during the season.
Well, that was because we owned him, and that was the sales talk. So, much as I wouldn't like doing it, it was part of the business. So,
to be fair, he backed it up with his results. You know, he was a tremendous 2-year-old, wasn't he?
Well, I had done it with Teofilo, mentioning the Triple Crown and all that, but maybe Galileo wasn't popular at the time, and there was no bite for him as a 2-year-old. So we ended up owning him then all the way through, and it was very much on the agenda that I could do with selling Dawn Approach. So I sold a half share in him to Sheikh Mohammed after he won the Coventry. And of course he progressed then from there, fortunately.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about Galileo and your particular support for him a little bit later on. But the 3-year-old season for Dawn Approach began as a lot of people expected. He won the Guineas. And he won well that day.
Yeah, really well.
What was he doing leading into the 3-year-old career? Carried on in the belief that, was he still bossing things? And
getting after him early on
yeah,
kind of settled his mind. And he knew then at that stage that his destiny was as a racehorse. And he settled down nicely, and we had no bother with him then after that at all. And we were able to winter him without riding him out. You know, we just turned him in and out, and that went fine. But we had also done that with New Approach, so it was the same pattern then for him.
Obviously, the Derby, he just pulled his way out of the race.
But he got a bump when he came out and it set him alight. And the race was over at that stage. But fortunately, Kevin looked after him and just let him canter home. So he was nice and fresh then for the St. James's Palace. And he put everything right that day. Yeah. And I have to say that both John Ferguson and Sheikh Mohammed were very much in agreement about sort of letting me decide that he should run there so quickly after the Derby. But he came out of the Derby very well, and we concentrated then on getting him settled down, and he was just right then. But we had a terrific pacemaker for him. The horse that was second in the Dewhurst, we used him as a pacemaker, who's now a very good sire in India. Yeah. So it was ideal, you know, having a really good pacemaker, and everything worked out well for him.
Temperamentally, do you think he was a miler? Really, but everything suited.
Oh,
Strongly
he
run mile.
He was a miler. Yeah.
You mentioned the Derby. Rule of the World won that year's Derby.
Yes.
And then Rule of the World bumped into one of your horses, who's actually over to Steve's right. And that's Trading Leather, who was, again, a wonderfully tough horse.
Yes.
But on Irish Derby Day, particularly good.
He was. And with hindsight, he was the one that should have been at Epsom. And leaving Don Approach to the mile. But like he beat the Derby winner very easily at the Curragh, so I always felt that was a race that we left behind.
There are, again, a lot of very good ones in this spell. What's the next one you wanted to?
These are no particular order, but Poetic Flair, there's a theme we've had about horses who have bravely campaigned, but Poetic Flair was, you know, didn't miss many opportunities, and he was a really good horse again, very tough, even when in defeat. He was, you know, his record is excellent. We've been another horse, you know, another English Guinness and St James's Palace winner.
Well, he was the breadwinner for here as well.
Yeah.
So we had to keep him going every time he was ready to go. So and he was very much like his sire early in the year. You know, he had that air of invincibility about him, and he was cocky. And we decided anyway that we'd let him start at Naas, and he won well there. And then, of course, we got the dreadful COVID after that, and I think he grew a couple of inches then during the summer, and we didn't have him ready enough for the Dewhurst. And even though he ran well in it, and we were very happy with him after it, and we knew that we still had a horse. And then he won the Group 3 at Leopardstown, and won another Group 3 the following year, and then went for the Guineas and did the business there and on to the St James's Palace. He'd be one of the better horses now that I've trained. And the only regret about it all was that none of the moneyed people in the Western world stood up for him, and I had to sell him to Japan.
The one thing I think Steve just alluded to with Poetic Flair was that, you know, in victory and defeat, you seem to get 100% from him. You mentioned Alexander Goldrun giving you 97%.
Yeah.
Certainly the view was in a race that he gave Kevin Manning everything.
He did,
when he asked him.
yeah. Very, very genuine horse. And you couldn't draw a better looking horse. You know, he's a perfect specimen and one of the soundest horses I've ever had. So he had pedigree, soundness and racing ability, but it still wasn't enough for Europe or the Western world.
Does that disappoint you?
Yeah, big time, yeah, because I'd love to be using him as a sire.
Is there a reason, you think, why he's not a horse?
Well, his sire wasn't doing him any favours. Don Approach wasn't doing that well. But Don Approach wouldn't be the first stallion to only have one really good one. Hopefully he'll have more, but he's only got one really good one to date. And it didn't stop some of the others who had only one from becoming good sires themselves. Like, I'd have a lot of confidence in him that he will be a successful sire if he gets the right opportunities. And while he was a little bit better on the fast ground, he could fairly well operate in soft ground as well. And as I mentioned, like his soundness was unquestionable.
Whilst you had Poetic Flair, who was obviously pretty good at 2, but even better at 3, there was another horse that you had alongside Poetic Flair and McSweeney.
Yes.
And there was almost a day that seemed a date with destiny as a 2-year-old when he won the Group 1.
Yes, yeah. He was a very good 2-year-old, and we were reasonably confident going to Doncaster with him that he would do the business.
When they met in the Irish Guineas, here and Poetic Flair, what was your feeling going into it? Who would come out the best?
I felt that Poetic Flair would win it, but I think the going was his undoing on the day.
Right.
Yeah.
It still only went down by a short head. It was still a cracking race.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And I don't normally run 2 in a classic.
No.
But that was McSweeney's prep run for the Derby.
Right.
Because he doesn't do much at home.
Right.
And I didn't think he was fit enough. But in any case, he was. And he handled the ground much better than Poetic Flair did.
Do you think, as a racehorse at the end of their career, would you say Poetic Flair was the slightly better of the two in terms of talent, or not much in it?
Poetic Flair was definitely the better horse. Yeah. But then he was an out-and-out miler. Yeah. And the reason he didn't win the Champion Stakes at Leopardstown, that was his last hurrah, was that he didn't get the last 100 yards. Yeah. But even when he was beaten that day, he gave it all. Yeah.
Just going to pick up on a few others that we haven't had time to go into great depth about. But one filly that I enjoyed watching racing was Plaichcock. And interestingly enough, she beat Found in the Irish Guineas. And then her next run, which is again very unusual, was in the Ribblesdale. You don't often see that pattern with with history in racing, but not a problem for a Jim Bolger trained runner.
Well, you get a lot of horses that run in the Guineas and then go on to Epsom and win it, maybe, or even the ones that might be second or third in the Guineas would go on and win at Epsom or come back to the Curragh and win the Irish Derby.
Yeah.
So she was that sort of filly, that she wasn't really a miler, but she was the best I had on the day. And we had a fairly good pacemaker for her as well. And we made a good test of stamina, and she prevailed. And then we stepped up then after that. I think all her races then after that.
She had substance to your feeling that Teofilo, because she was by Teofilo, would have stayed, because she certainly had enough stamina to be a good 1.5 mile filly, well, very good 1.5 mile filly. So that backs up your feeling that Teofilo would have got 1.5 mile.
Yeah, and she went on to win the Oaks at York. Yeah. And the following year then, she was only beaten a head or a short head, very little anyway. Yeah. In I think it was at Chantilly,
the opera.
Prix de l'Opera,
Prix de l'Opera, yeah.
Yeah.
But the good thing about that was that Freddie Tylicki won the race.
Yes,
So.
Speedy Warding won
Yes,
that race.
yes, and it was his last big winner.
Yeah.
Steve's got a list there of...
the Dewhurst.
Yes.
I say, what a race that was for you. We've already mentioned a couple of them, but one we haven't talked about. Teofilo, New Approach, Intense Focus, Parish Hall, Dawn Approach. 5 out of 6 years you won the Dewhurst.
Yes, yeah.
Parish Hall we haven't touched on very much. Again, what's your memories of him?
He had become quite a good 2-year-old at that stage, and the following year then he got a serious infection in a joint, and I think he was even declared for the 2,000 guineas. I've no doubt he would have won it because it was won that year by Power, and he had beaten him, I think, in the Dewhurst as well. So that was just bad luck that we didn't have him, and he was never the same horse then after that. He came back and he won listed races, but he was never as good. It had a lasting effect on him, I think.
Other good horses that we haven't had time. I mean, there's Margarula. I mean, we haven't really said much about Intense Focus, who's another Dewhurst winner for you.
Yeah, Margarula was a bargain. I think she cost 20 grand as a yearling, and went on to win the Irish Oaks. So she left a good return.
Yeah.
One thing I definitely want to talk to you about, Jim, is your support of Galileo. I think it's been well documented that your support of Galileo was key, influential in establishing him, because obviously the ilk that he was, a mile and a half horse, seemingly stamina has been his thing. You're talking, it's not really that popular with commercial breeders, but you were prepared from very, very early on. You're going to back Galileo. What did you see that you liked so much?
Well, I couldn't believe that he stood his first season at 50 grand.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a giveaway. While it's a lot of money, for a dual Derby winner like he was, and he showed as well as a 3-year-old at Leopardstown that he was fairly effective over 1.25 miles. So I never had any worries about his the turn of foot that he had shown. I knew that the speed was there and the class was definitely there. And I used to talk to Michael Kinane about him, and he loved him in every way. He couldn't find any fault with him. So I thought, he'd be at least 100,000 going to stud, but for some reason he wasn't popular, and after a couple of years he was even less popular. So I had a reasonably good horse by him called Heliostatic, was his first one, and he lacked temperament but had a nice bit of ability, so I stuck with him anyway. And then his price came down to 37,500. So at that stage, it was a no-brainer. But nobody in the province of Munster was saying anything good about him. But I kept going anyway, and fortunately, I was lucky. But then at the same time, I bought New Approach in Goffs, but then I had trained his Dan Park Express, so I was attracted to him for 2 reasons. And the other filly that I bought then, and she cost I think 80,000, was Lush Lashes. And I bought a few mares by him then as well, which I still have.
Yeah.
And some of them are doing okay. But they were very reasonably priced.
Yeah.
And a few years later then, of course, he was gone through the clouds and I couldn't get near him.
Yeah. And physically, because obviously you talked about his ability on the racecourse, physically, everyone was always positive about him. Did you like the actual physical specimen?
Oh, yeah, you couldn't find fault with him. Yeah. Beautiful horse. And great temperament. And he stood up to his training very well. Aidan did a really good job with him.
Now, speaking of standing up to training, obviously you've done that with horses for a long time. You're also very, very well known as a trainer of men as well. A number of stars in the game have passed through an education with Jim Bolger, and many speak very highly of that time. Just picking out a few, obviously Aidan O'Brien, Sir Anthony McCoy, Paul Carberry also. What do you think it is about these people when they leave the confines of an education with Jim Bolger that has them looking back on it with fondness?
Well, before I answer that question, the best of the lot was female, and that was Una.
Right.
She does a really good job for me, and has always done so. And after that, then I always say about the people that I've had here, they were good when they came, and I didn't do them any harm. And they obviously picked up a lot and found out how to do it and how not to do it. But I'm very happy that they all went on to do very well.
Must be some days where you'd be disappointed that Aidan's gone on to do so well when he runs a horse against one of yours.
I was only disappointed once. The stewards gave him a race at the Curragh one day, early on. And I was disappointed that day because I felt that he shouldn't have got it anyway. But apart from that, I'm happy for him. Yeah.
And there's sort of, what are they? Mythical stories, or stories about AP with his injuries and, been toughened up under the school of Jim Bolger. Was it as clear cut as that?
Well, he obviously, as he says himself, he has a high pain threshold, but it let him down that morning anyway. But I'm not sure that he likes me talking much about it. But I think somewhere along the line that it was mixed up with something to do with when he was leaving. But what really happened there was that he got a fall, a very cold, frosty morning, and I think it was his femur he had broken, and I was first on the scene. Fortunately, I had a woolen quarter sheet in the Jeep, and I put it over him, and we had already called the ambulance and called my GP, thinking that he'd ease the pain a bit for him, which he did. And he wasn't taking that one very well, but maybe he learned it all at that stage that this is minor in comparison to what jump jockeys have to go through. But I think the fact that he was so ambitious that he somehow was able to compartmentalise the pain, and it was all suffered for the success that he would subsequently have.
I mean, he and Paul Carberry from the outside, you couldn't get different characters. Were they? Could you see that here? With as youngsters, could you see the future men?
Well, Paul was as quiet as a mouse when he was here, and never put a foot wrong, except himself and McCoy went riding neighbours' ponies one day. But apart from that, neither of them ever put a foot wrong. And I think he possibly got a bit wild after he left here, but that didn't interfere with his success as a jockey. But when he came here, he was the most untidy rider that we had in the yard, and we managed to get his toe in the iron, flat back and low head, make him aerodynamic, and by the time he appeared on the track, he was one of the most stylish apprentices that there has been, and he was certainly very stylish as a jump jockey.
Very much.
So he learned the style here, and okay, he got a bit wild, but that's Paul. But he was a wonderful jockey.
Yeah. One thing I must ask you, speaking about jockeys, is obviously Christy Roach rode for you for such a long time, but Kevin Manning and obviously there's the family tie-in now, but that relationship has been lasted as long as many people can remember in the sport. What's Kevin like? He's normally quite he keeps himself to himself, so it's very hard for us to.
Yeah, he's the same here.
Yeah,
he doesn't he doesn't change, and in a way he'd be a bit like myself. He doesn't have highs and he doesn't have lows, so he steers a middle course, but he's a wonderful jockey and he's been a great help to me.
Yeah. And the last thing is, I mean, how much, if someone said to you, as I will, how much have you enjoyed your time as a racehorse trainer? Obviously with the breeding side of things, how much have you enjoyed the spell that you've done, and how do you look back with, the reflective look of your achievements in the sport?
Well, I always think to myself anyway, and I think I say so as well, like it's no big deal. I probably have enjoyed about 10% of it, and the other 90%, it's tough enough, Yeah.
Wow.
And that's training. I remember I had a very good relationship with Vincent O'Brien, even though he was much my senior. But we always got along very well. And he came to me one day at the Curragh and he said, "Jim, I'm thinking of retiring." And immediately I said, "Oh, Vincent, you can't do that." I said, "You're Irish racing. It'll fall asunder," even though he was beating me regularly, but that's how I saw him. And he says, "I'd like to continue." He says, "But the pressure is immense." So here am I thinking, as a slightly middle-aged trainer, hearing Vincent O'Brien saying that the pressure is immense.
Yeah.
I was thinking at that stage, when you get up to your 70s or approaching 80s, that there'd be no such thing as pressure.
Yeah.
So I found that very, very strange. And he retired a couple of years later. So he just had enough of it at that stage. I don't feel like that, but at the same time, answering your question, there's great satisfaction from the big days, but there are an awful lot of things that happen in between. Say, like Teofilo, when he got his injury a few days before the 2000 Guineas. That's hard enough to take,
Yeah.
But then you look back and say, well, wasn't I lucky to have him in the first place,
Yeah. And as we wrap up, I'd say that I think it's fair to say, 100% enjoyment spending time in your company
Absolutely.
today. Thank you so much for having us. It's certainly been fond memories for us to look back on, and I hope that you've enjoyed that as well. Thank you very much, Jim Bolger.
Well, I've enjoyed today more than a lot of the training.
That's a good ending.